Hey everyone, we've got another Leela Chess 0 game for you today, again against Turbofish in the CCC9, the Gauntlet bonus free. I'll post a link into where you can watch the games below. But again, this game was quite nicely played by Leela, and it's 15 minutes each with a 5-second increment. But again, Leela does this weird thing where she just overplays in the endgame, as you'll see. So Leela is white here, Turbofish is black. Leela plays e4. And we get into an Alekhine when Turbofish plays knight to f6, e5 and knight d5. Leela plays d4 and black plays d6. So white is now grabbing the centre, and after knight to f3 just supporting the e5 pawn, bishop g4 pins that knight, and Leela plays bishop to e2 to unpin. If black here decides to take the pawn on e5, white can play knight takes e5. After bishop takes e2, queen takes e2 and e6. Queen b5 is just a really nice move for white, and white certainly has the advantage in this opening, just due to queen takes b7 on the next move. In the game though, Turbofish played e6, supporting the knight on d5, but typically now white plays c4, which is what Leela played, kicks this knight from the d5 square. Black plays knight b6, e takes d6, c takes d6 and castles. This is all rather typical for this opening. Black plays bishop e7, white plays h3, trying to kick this bishop off this diagonal, bishop h5, and knight c3 now from Leela. Black develops a bit more with knight to d7, and Leela plays b3, supporting this c4 pawn, maybe even preparing moves like a4 at some point, and typically in these type of positions, bishop e3 and maybe queen to b3 and b4 at some point, just launching a queenside pawn storm is what white tends to do. Black plays castles now, and Leela plays bishop to e3. So white has now nicely developed most of their pieces, just need to develop the queen really, and they're ready to launch these pawns up the board. Bishop g6 is played by Turbofish, trying to dominate the b1 to h7 diagonal, but white plays rook c1, so again preparing this pawn storm on the queen side. Turbofish plays h6, maybe stopping any knight g5 ideas, maybe even preparing bishop g5 themselves, giving this bishop an escape square and also the king. So this is a move that does lots, but Leela now plays a4, preparing a5. So we see Leela finally prepares this pawn storm on the queen side. Knight f6 is played, so Turbofish is giving this knight on b6 a square to jump into once Leela plays a5. So Leela does this, just a5, knight d7, and Leela plays b4. So the idea here is to play queen b3, followed by rook fd1, and start launching these pawns with b5 and c5, and white will have a nice space advantage. And this system is also similar to sort of Scandinavian positions, where white has a d4, c4 and b4 pawn all on relatively nice squares. So you've got to say black is sort of struggling for squares at the moment and has a lot of compact pieces. a6 is played by Turbofish, stopping b5, but queen b3 now, rook e8, rook fd1 from Leela, and bishop f8. So black's just manoeuvring their pieces around. They've got the rook on the e-file, maybe preparing e5 ideas, and this bishop's nicely tucked away on f8. But now Leela plays knight d2, and I think she's played this so she can play bishop to f3 and start targeting this b7 pawn. So Turbofish tries to trade this bishop with bishop h5. Leela of course captures, knight takes, and now white's got some moves to think of here. In the game Leela decides to play c5, but d5 may have been an option as well. If captures, white can actually take with the knight, and if knight to f6, takes and bishop d4. I feel like white has got a slightly better position here. Black can play rook c8, after knight to f1, knight to e4, knight to e3. It's quite even with even material, but you've got to say white's probably got the advantage. This d6 pawn may become weaker at a later date. White may be able to play bishop b6 and start doubling on the d file. And also knight d5 for Leela looks quite nice too. In the game though, Leela played c5, so what Leela's done here is just got all their pawns on dark squares, and just blunts this f8 bishop really badly. Their own bishop is sort of outside these pawns at the moment. So in the game, Turbofish played d5, and Leela still has the choice of playing bishop f4 at a later date, so this bishop could be really strong in the endgame. knight to a4 is played, preparing knight to b6. And interestingly, the computers all give knight b8 as the best move in this position. But this looks really terrible for black now, because this allows knight b6, attacking the rook. It's only got one escape square, so rook a7 is forced. And that rook is just absolutely terrible for black, and already I think white's in a promising position. If white just leaves their knight on b6, there's no way for that rook to ever escape. So this is a really good long-term advantage for Leela. So Leela just continues improving their position with knight to f3. Black plays knight c6, and now knight to e5 from Leela. Bishop e7 is played by Turbofish, and here I think Leela could have played g3 to stop any knight to f4 ideas, maybe even prepare king g2 and f4 themselves. If knight f6 from Turbofish, white could play h4, and after knight to e4 play king g2 and prepare f3 this way. Black's pretty much forced to go backwards with knight to f6, and white can just improve their position with rook e1. And it's got to be said white has a nice advantage, mainly due to that b6 knight and stopping this rook ever getting out. So white can do quite a lot of moves if they wish. In the game, Leela just improved their position with rook e1. This allows bishop g5 and the trading of the dark squared bishops. But Leela was wise not to just trade the bishops off. She played queen to d1 here, attacking the knight on h5. And after Turbofish takes on e3, Leela captures on h5 with the queen. I think a bad move would have been f takes e3, because then black can play knight f6 and jump into this e4 square. If white plays knight d3, knight to e4 and queen g4. Again, I think white's doing slightly better, but this knight on e4 can be really bothersome for white. I think Leela played the right move, and takes on h5 is really good. And of course now the bishop on e3 is also attacked. If bishop takes d4 here, white can actually play queen f7 check, and after king h8 just play knight c6, so black can't go in for this. This is because if b takes c6, the queen will just take the rook on a7. So the rook on a7 is a real pain for black. Instead, in this position, Turbofish now takes on e5, so knight takes e5, so they swap pieces. So if black plays knight d3 in this position, forking these two rooks, white can just play rook to f1, and after knight takes c1, play queen takes f7 check, and after king h8, just take the knight. And to be honest, this exchange is no advantage to black, because again this rook can't get out, and this knight is actually more powerful than this rook at this point in the game. So this would do nothing for black's position. So in the games, Turbofish decided to play knight c6 instead, attacking b4. And now Leela finally decides to open things up. She plays e4 here, and after d takes e4, plays rook takes e4. Black has a choice to make here. If knight takes d4, I think this is bad for black due to rook d1. e5 does save the knights, and also threatens knight to e2 and knight to f3 ideas. But after the white plays a calm move king h1, they're threatening rook takes e5 now, and there's nothing black can do about it. If f6, the queen targets the rook, so rook d takes d4 can be played, and if captures, just rook takes here, and white wins a piece. So after king h1, rook e6 is actually given us the best move, but white can just play knight rook takes e5. After g6, white can actually take on e6. And if black goes after the white queen, just rook e4. After king g7, rook d takes d4, and again white's got the two rooks for the queen, and this rook on a7 is never getting out due to the knight on b6. So instead of taking on d4 with the knight, black goes for the free pawn on b4. But now Leela starts attacking, getting their rooks into nice open files with rook g4, threatening maybe queen h6, but after f5, rook g3, queen h6 is still threatened, so black plays king h8. And Leela played rook e1 in this position. Rook d1 was also an option to protect this d4 pawn. If rook e7, rook e3, and white's got an array of moves. Knight d5, rook e5. You have to feel like white still has the advantage, but actually I think Leela's move was better in the game. She played rook e1. And if black decides to take on d4 with check, white can play king h2, and this rook on e8 threatens to be taken. And there's also possibilities of queen g6 coming up next. So if black protects this rook with the queen, they can play queen g6 threatening mate. And if rook e7, just play rook takes e6. And this threatens rook takes e7 followed by knight c8, forking again this painful rook on a7. So this rook on a7 is just an absolute thorn in black's side during this game. After rook e1, Turbofish plays rook to e7, protecting the g7 square, and queen h4 to pin this rook. Knight c6 protects everything. White plays king h1, king h7 is played, and queen h5 is played by Leela, threatening queen g6. Queen e8 protects this, but Leela actually just trades off now and plays d5. So Leela's attacking this knight, and black can't recapture due to rook takes e8. So Turbofish decides to take the pawn on a5. They may as well, but this actually loses a knight due to rook a3, and this knight has no more squares to go to. So Turbofish puts it back on c6, and after d takes c6, b takes c6, the rook on a7 is finally opened up, but at what cost? Well, in actual fact, black has 3 pawns for the knight, but this might be too much in this game, especially with the talent that computers possess these days with the pieces. The pawns are very isolated, so this could be easy pickings for this knight at the moment in this game. Leela plays knight c4, rook d8 is played, and this knight does well to block these open files from black. They play rook b8, but this allows rook takes e6. So white's already recaptured one of their pawns. Rook b1 check is played, king h2 and rook f1 to protect this f5 pawn. Leela plays knight c8, rook d7 and plays rook to d6, so stopping black from gaining these open files. Black tries rook b7, but then Leela shuts it down again with knight to b6, and now white is threatening to take on c6, also threatening to take on a6. Again, these pawns are just easy pickings. Black attacks a pawn with rook c1. White plays rook to d7. Rook b8 is played, so no trading at the moment. But now just rook g3, and there's 2 rooks attacking this g7 pawn. Rook g8 is the only move to defend this, and Leela plays rook to f7. I should point out here rook c5 doesn't work for black due to knight d7, attacking the rook and also threatening knight to f6 with check, whereby the king and the rook will be forked. So after rook f7, Turbofish plays f4, rook captures on f4, and again rook takes c5 doesn't really work here due to knight d7, attacking the rook. If rook g5, knight f8 check, king h8 and just rook gf3. And this is a really nice position for white, whereby black is just running out of squares, and maybe white can even play moves like h4, maybe even h5 and knight g6. Very comfortable indeed. So after rook takes f4, black plays king h8, Leela plays rook c4 protecting the pawn, and Turbofish decides to take off the rook. The knight recaptures and Turbofish plays g5. And rook a3 is played by Leela. Now we're up to move 55 in this game, and it actually goes on to move 111. And I'll just go through these moves rather quickly because again Leela does this thing where she takes an absolute age to win an endgame. I'm not sure why, but we'll just go through it. So g4, h4, rook e8 to protect the pawn, and king g3, h5, and Leela just wins the pawn on h5 eventually. Check. Rook goes back, knight d6, g3 and takes on h5. So Leela wins another pawn, and now we have equal pawns, but Leela's just a knight ahead. King f6, king g4, rook g8 and king f3. Again it looks as though black just loses another pawn. Knight f5, and after a few moves white's got 2 passed pawns in the g and h file. And to be honest, white could just start pushing these up and just get a queen really quickly, but Leela decides to give up the knight for some reason and just slowly but surely push these pawns up. For instance here, Leela could just play h8 and get a queen, but she just wants to make black suffer for ages. So finally she gets a queen, and for some reason she always loves to give rook and king checkmate even though the position was easily won quickly. But I do like the way she delivers these rook checkmates. So yeah, finally rook h1 is checkmate against Turbofish. And this was just a really nice finish from Leela. In this middle game, it looks as though the position was just won here with c5. And just putting all these pawns on black squares against this f8 bishop. Now after d5 and knight f4, Leela's just dominating the dark squares, and there's not really anything black can do. They're just shuffling around the pieces. I would like to say knight b8 is a poor move, but it's just weird that all the engines give this as the best move. But after knight b6 and rook a7, it just looks like game over for black. This rook is just a massive fawn in black's position, and in a lot of variations it costs black the game. So anyway, this was rather interesting, a very interesting opening. I hope you enjoyed my analysis. Please drop me a comment if there's anything I missed, or you just want to add some more variations. I always try and read the comments and respond. And please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I noticed a lot of you aren't at the moment, and it'd be appreciative if you did. And also please do send me some of your own games and email me, and I'll try and go through them on this channel. I'd very much like to do that. But anyway, hope to see you in the next video, and thank you for watching.